You're listening to The Whole Truth, a Resources Rising Stars podcast.
Welcome to this episode of The Whole Truth podcast. I'm Paul Armstrong. I've just been talking to George Bauk. He's the Executive Chairman of Thunderbird Resources. Don't ask me why it's called Thunderbird Resources, but I can tell you it's all systems go at the company's project in the famous Athabasca Basin. Can you say that really slowly? Athabasca Basin in Canada. The basin is famous for holding some of the biggest uranium projects in the world. Most importantly, they're very high grade. A successful exploration program in the Athabasca Basin would deliver huge returns for Thunderbird Resources shareholders, particularly given the company only has a market cap of $7 million. And when you look at some of the names on the share register, you can see that they are clearly attracted to this sort of leverage. George isn't one for mucking around. He's done the geophysical work and he's about to put a hole into it. In fact, he tells us in this chat that the first hole is only a couple of weeks away from being drilled. There's a series of holes going into some well-defined targets. The company's got plenty of cash up its sleeve, as well as some shares in another highly promising explorer called Firetail, but that's probably one for another day. Have a listen to what George has got to say about Thunderbird, the upcoming drilling program, the leverage to the rapidly growing uranium market, and it might be one for a dabble. George, Thunderbird's a go on the drilling rig.
Absolutely. So we signed the drilling contractor. So all final preparations are now in place to start mid-August. So great drilling contractor, getting the helicopter all sorted out. We got accommodation. The crews are ready to go. So we're within a month of starting drilling.
Now, you've got a market cap of circa $7 million at Thunderbird. It's about as leveraged to play in the uranium space as you could get. One would probably think a couple of decent sniffs and there could be a bit of share price action.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to see the asset base that we've got, the uranium thematic, look, if you want the real blue sky, you have a look at NextGen and see what a discovery's done to that company over the last 10 years. They only discovered that in 2014, and they've got the market cap in the billions, if you like, and that's an Athabasca Basin story.
So why do you think that Thunderbird's project in the Athabasca Basin could generate such wealth? It is a needle in a haystack business, isn't it?
Oh, look, absolutely. I mean, one of the real advantages of being in the basin, it's the highest grade uranium in the world. The flip side of that is the analogy you make of needle in the haystack. So, you know, we've had to go through very detailed exploration processes, geophysics, worked on radon, had a look at structures and everything. And when the guys continually look at what Hidden Bay offers and compare it to the deposits to the north at Rabbit Lake, have a look at NextGen's Arrow deposit, it's got the hallmarks of having a deposit sitting within all the structures that we have.
Now, Athabasca Basin, world famous, arguably the best uranium place in the world, if not one of the top three. Why would Hidden Bay, if it's got all this potential, not have been drilled, any deposits that are there on your ground not have been found before now?
Yeah, look, we put out an interesting couple of maps on a recent presentation, not the one we put out this week, in a previous one. If you go back and have a look and you look at the downturn of uranium, people just dropped their holdings, moved on, and all of a sudden we've now had a land rush. It just hasn't been drilled. I'll give you an example. The Saskatchewan government gives you a 50% premium if you fly airborne geophysics and provide the data to the government, because modern exploration hasn't been done as probably as you'd expect in other parts of the world when you see rushes. So there's so much work that's still got to be done, so many deposits still to be found. There's been a real concentration around the areas where Cameco and Orano have been with their famous deposits, MacArthur River, Cigar Lake. There's been a lot of effort in that little corridor, but there's just so many other areas that have been untapped, and you know, people are now getting back in there. There seems to be equity money getting put back into the small cap space to start drilling again.
Now, you mentioned MacArthur, you mentioned Cigar Lake. There's another very famous one there, of course, in the Rabbit, isn't there?
Yep, that's right. So that's just about 20 kilometres north of us. So when you stand back and have a look at the macro view of the basin and look at the unconformity structure, which is really important, that runs right in the middle of our property. And you look at the granites, the gravity lows, all those features that you see around Rabbit Lake just north of us are sitting right on our property.
So why, when Rabbit Lake was discovered, and of course Rabbit Lake, for the benefit of those who haven't followed the Athabasca Basin in any detail of late, Rabbit Lake was one of the great uranium mines, no longer operating. Why would the owners and developers of Rabbit Lake not have gone into your ground?
Yeah, look, that's a good question. I mean, you got to go through the exploration budgets of the past and have a look at, how little was spent for a period of time. The prices went down. You look at the big companies, and whenever you see the uranium or the commodity price go down, you sort of see a very big link to how much exploration dollars are spent. So, it's a big basin. I mean, there's a lot of potential targets that sit there. A lot of the guys in-house from an exploration perspective believe that modern technology hasn't been applied to some of the historical drilling targeting that's now starting to uncover new areas undercover that they didn't have that information and see through 20, 30 years ago.
Now, you talk about the uranium price, obviously one of the most cyclical commodities known to man, and it has been down and out for a very long time, hence the lack of exploration expenditure, as you're saying, George. But the interest in the past, 18 months, if you like, a bit longer, has been absolutely phenomenal on the resurgence around the world of nuclear power and the like. I think it's well accepted that the uranium demand is going to continue to grow. There's been a lack of investment in it, so hence the demand growth is not matched by the forecast supply growth, to say the least. Is this one of the things you think are driving a lot of this interest in the Athabasca Basin again?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, we're actually starting to see a real underpin of demand. I mean, this whole thematic around clean energy, you're seeing less protesting around uranium being part of the energy mix going forward. Just to sustain the current levels of uranium as part of the fuel mix needs more mines coming on.
Well, it's increasingly seen as an environmental solution rather than an environmental problem, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And so therefore, you've got geopolitical issues. So a lot of people are really concerned about Russia's big impact they have on the supply chain. So you're seeing the US looking to ban Russian fuel going into the US downstream. And what better place to be to partner with the US than in Canada, because you just drive it straight over the border. It's got great proximity to the US uranium nuclear plants. And then you've got other areas like Japan that's bringing back on reactors continually. So the demand is there. It's real. We just haven't seen that investment, as you've mentioned. And the basin's just got the best projects in the world. And I think, again, I keep repeating next gen, but that discovery only happened in 2014. We're just seeing the economics come out. I mean, the average grade of that deposit is 4.35% U3O8. You can't mess up that project. I mean, if you look at the average operating costs, that survives in all cycles. Best projects always do that in any commodity. So when you get excited, or when why and where should we be exploring, the basin has got the best projects. It's got support from local communities. I mean, the local indigenous groups are pro-uranium. So that just lines everything up to being a great place to do business.
So give your shareholders, Thunderbird shareholders and prospective shareholders, I suppose, a quick snapshot of what's going to happen with the drilling program. When does it start? What are you trying to achieve here in the short term?
Yeah, okay. So look, we're mobilising the rig. We plan to start mid-August. It's a 2,400 metre diamond drill program. We're targeting 5 holes to begin with. So, that's not a lot of holes for the size of the...
How deep would an average hole be?
So 5 divided by 2,400, so about 450 metres is going to be the average depth. So probably vertically about 380 metres is going to be where we target. And these are about going into our most lowest of gravity lows. They are the real driver of this exploration program that we're looking at. We're comparing it to its proximity to the granite. We're looking at it to the unconformity to other conductors and structures. We're going to show on some diagrams in our current presentation where some of our holes are spaced where you could easily find a mine between them. So people shouldn't get concerned that if we're not to hit the mother lode in these first 5 holes, that this ruins the project. The project's got no value. It's the beginning of the exploration program. There's no question you always try to hit the middle of the mother lode, but at the same time in a maiden program, you're looking to find indicators to make sure that we're close. Are they near misses? To then give us the, where to go to next.
And how long do you think it'll take to turn around some assays and some news flow on this?
Okay, so look, each hole is going to be about 10 days. So we're looking at ways in which we update the market, whether it's downhole probe data. So I'm just confirming that with Robin Wilson, who's got to sign it off from a JORC perspective. But we hope to be trying to get a news flow back to the market every 2 holes. So that's our intent, to go back every 20 days.
Right. So it's not a long wait, but they are time-consuming holes, aren't they? 10 days for a hole, and then you've got to get it off and get it assayed. So it's not a 5-minute process. But nonetheless, you talk about essentially a cold, warm, hot type scenario, because the Athabasca Basin is known for being very high grade. The flip side of that is that it's not a disseminated type of ore body, so therefore the chances of hitting, as you put it, the mother lode, getting that rich vein straight up is relatively low in the context of things, but there are signs, there's smoke around that you would be looking for.
That's exactly right. So we'll be looking at certain type of lithology, the clays. What are the key features we're looking for that might describe a near miss? We're hoping to get mineralisation in these holes, but we've got to make sure that we understand that it's not, if we don't hit X meters at X percent.
It's not a binary outcome in hole 1.
100%. And again, you go back to Next Gen, they did not hit the mother lode in the first hole. This was all about, vectoring in and getting some good early holes that were thereabouts, using the data, going back in and then getting that discovery hole. So we're not being pessimistic about it. We're just being realistic and making sure that investors aren't on the edge of their seats thinking it's make or break on every hole and it's got to be the mother lode. So people need to come along the journey, be patient, and realise that the uplift is massive. I mean, like you said at the outset, when you're talking about a $6-7 million market cap, what we might be able to achieve is a massive uplift for shareholders.
I'd like to think that a decent bit of smoke could be enough to give the share price a good nudge.
Oh, look, you'd hope so. You'd hope to see that movement. I mean, 92 Energy is a great story from the last few years, which is just south of us. They were sitting along the unconformity and they had that early success. That saw them being taken over by Athabasca and create a larger organisation with a lot of cash. There's a lot of eyes on the basin. We've seen Paladin going through a takeover of Fission at the moment. So you're starting to see activity of players like Paladin, which is one of the large companies in the world, starting to look a lot closer at the basin than historically you never saw a lot of non-TSX companies play in the basin.
Now, you've got plenty of money to come back and have another go. That's one of the points of difference here, isn't it? Thunderbird is armed and dangerous.
Yeah, exactly right. So, we had the good fortune of capitalising on our sale of our Peruvian asset. We sold 10 million shares in June this year, which added another $1 million. We've still got 16 million of those shares in our treasury. So that's another element of non-dilutionary cash that's available to us. We've got a really positive budget at the moment on this drill program. So as long as we get the right meterage on a daily basis and we don't have issues on efficiency, we hope that we've even got some meters up our sleeve on our existing budget for these first 5 holes.
So how much cash do you have now?
So post the completion last week of the capital raise, we've got about $4.3 million in the bank plus the Firetail shares. Right.
Now tell us about the Firetail shares, because there's a bit of a link here. Firetail obviously has one of its directors is Simon Lawson, who's well known to our audience on the Whole Truth podcast, George. He's done a few updates in this forum during the success of his Dalgaranga project. But Firetail in itself was on a journey that could also be rewarding for Thunderbird.
Yeah, exactly right. So we did the transaction just over 12 months ago with the Peruvian asset where Firetail really started to pivot and focus on copper. And then we saw in recent months that they've identified and acquired the project in Canada. We've added Glenn Poole, because I sit on the board of Firetail as well. So we've added Glenn Poole as CEO, and there's going to be a real focus on what looks like to be a forgotten asset in Canada that could uplift huge amount of value. They've got some great analogues nearby that show that with a small amount of drilling, you could really unlock a great asset there. And we've got a fantastic holding. I mean, we're going to sit there post all this raising, we'll have about 5% of Firetail as Thunderbird Resources. So
what's that worth?
So look, today, let's just use 10 cents. I think it's trading at 7 at the moment. I mean, that's another $1.2 million. But the leverage there, if they get the uplift, as you mentioned earlier, Simon Lawson's done an amazing job at Spartan. That's been an enormous discovery. Simon will hopefully be able to coach and mentor Glenn there, and if we can be a tenth of the success of Spartan, that's going to be a massive re-rate of Firetail. A re-rate of Firetail just gives Thunderbird leverage on additional shares to look at what we're focused on.
Now, speaking of name dropping here, as well as Simon Lawson, of course, you've got some pretty well known major shareholders of your own at Thunderbird.
Yeah, exactly right. So look, we've got Tolga as one of the major shareholders. We've got Sky Harbour.
Tolga, of course, being Tolga Kamova of Cyril Resources fame. He was the man who I think is credited with driving that from nothing to an almighty success in its heyday. Tolga's been around the traps. He's obviously well known and he knows that how to move a share price.
Yeah, look, I mean, and he's recently had success in Meteoric in Brazil with the ionic rare earth deposit. Has got Patriot in Canada from a lithium perspective. So hopefully this is going to be his star uranium play in his portfolio, if you like, and we have a discovery and he's got another tick of a commodity in his portfolio. So
who else is on the register as well as Tom?
Yep, so we've got Jason Peterson's another key cornerstone shareholder. So Jason has been there for a long time and been a big supporter of this and has been part of the capital raise we did last week. So Jason, through CPS Capital, underpinned the placement, and then we had RM Capital do a fully underwritten rights issue. So they were the two behind it. So Jason's there. Jason's had a lot of success. He was a cornerstone of Bellevue Gold, which has been a $1 billion plus company there. So that's been a success and a feather in Jason.
A very patient and supportive shareholder, I understand, across the board. He has a lot of interests and obviously a lot of experience in raising money for resources companies, and seems to have the patience of Job in terms of waiting around for them to do their thing. So that's a great asset. Who else is on the register?
Yep, so we've got Sky Harbour Resources. So Sky Harbour, we got one of the projects as part of going into uranium back in 2020. They're having some recent success in the Basin, sort of along strike from Cigar Lake and MacArthur River. So they've got a good shareholding in the company, being patient there as well. And they're a company that model, they're one of the biggest landholders in the Basin, joint venture out a number of their projects, leverage off that, and then drill a few of their own properties. We've also got Brian McMaster. So Brian's been involved in this company for a long time. And so Brian's been a supportive shareholder alongside with Jason Peterson. So he's another shareholder. I'm up there in the top 10. So I've backed myself in and made sure that I've got exposure to the story. Yeah, that sort of covers the major shareholders of.
Yes, I've got a few names lurking on the register there with a bit of form. As we said, $7 million. The leverage is there. You're about to drill. It's about as much as you can ask for from a junior exploration company. You've got the money. You're fully funded. You can afford some follow-up holes, and you're going to give it a crack. And over the next sort of couple of months, you're going to have a pretty good idea whether you could be onto a winner.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're also going to do an airborne survey on Surprise Creek, which is another one of our projects in the northwest corner of the Athabasca Basin. That's been sitting idle and has got a 1968 hole at 2.1 metres at 4.7% U3O8 from 59 metres. So that has never been followed up. That's a hole that was drilled.
So what's the plan there?
There's a hole that was drilled before I was born. So the plan there is to fly airborne survey. So there's been no modern geophysics done on that. So we've done mapping, had a look at what the old timers have done.
So
it's
a similar narrative. Bring in the geophysicists and the sampling and see if you can close in on some targets and put a hole in it.
Exactly right. So we would love to get up there and drill a couple of holes. We're starting to see a lot of companies go back into Uranium City. If you go back to the history of the Athabasca Basin, that's where uranium production started in the 40s. So that was the first area of uranium production in Canada, okay? And it wasn't till you had the discovery at Clough Lake that people moved south, and then you started seeing the eastern side of the basin with Cigar Lake and MacArthur River, Rabbit Lake, etc. So it's been the forgotten corner of the basin. So we pegged that ourselves about a couple of years ago. That's how open the basin was. We identified the historical hole, pegged the ground, done a bit of work on it, and now it's ripe for the picking. So Hidden Bay is our jewel in the crown, but we've got Surprise Creek, which we're going to fly the survey. We'll probably have that flown in August.
Okay, well, George, thanks for your time. Here's hoping that Hidden Bay needs to have a name change and it's anything but hidden, and it turns out to be another next gen, as you keep referring to. Obviously, the upside, the potential is enormous. We'll keep a close eye on it, and thanks for joining us on the Whole Truth podcast.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Paul.
You've been listening to The Whole Truth, a Resources Rising Stars podcast, produced by Resource Media, hosted by Paul Armstrong for Reed Corporate. Please note that Reed Corporate does not provide investment advice, and investors should seek personalised advice before making any investment decisions.